Yeah,
I've been thinking about my lockdown hair. Paul went out for a run last week, and some young lads were walking by, and one of them called out and said, "Look, there's Boris out for a run."
actually, I'm not sure if that's a compliment, is it really? Sounds
It
like he
suit
does need a
Boris.
haircut.
It does suit Boris somehow. But anyway, I have cut my husband's hair a bit since then. So how are
Yeah.
things in Australia, Heather?
Well, things in Australia are good.
Great.
We The lockdown is not as great as you are still fairly locked down.
Yes.
We still can get to a hairdresser, mind
Great.
you. I haven't been for a while. I'm
It's
this
looking
is
good.
natural now. Oh, natural.
Well, it
So
looks
yeah,
good.
I think we're very blessed in Australia
Yeah.
to not have so many infections, and we're fairly clear, but they're still quite strict. So
Yes.
I really feel for all of your listeners that have been affected by COVID. My
Yeah.
heart just goes out to,
Yeah.
and just seeing the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, his
Yes.
funeral, and to see our beautiful Queen just sitting there all alone. It's
Hmm.
just heartbreaking. It
Yes, it's
really is.
sad. Very sad.
My heart just goes out to
Yeah.
you all.
Yeah, thank you. Heather, I'd like to pick up from last time. We've been doing a little series on relationships and marriage, and you've been married over 40 years, 44 years. So,
Nearly.
yeah, nearly
Nearly.
44 years. That's a long time. So, tell
Yeah,
us
it's over
more.
2 life sentences. Just saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think personally, people have to be proactive if they want a partner. I think keeping ourselves like smart and good hygiene and, maybe a splash of aftershave, a splash of perfume, these things all are good. So, what's your thoughts on that?
I say, whatever you can, if a barn needs painting, then paint it.
Yeah, 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 that's
I
right.
think, I think absolutely. I mean, you've got to ask yourself, would you want to be married to someone like yourself? You know, I think be the best person,
Good
both
advice.
physically, but internally as well. Be the best you can.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Give yourself a good fighting chance.
Yeah, I think it's good to be proactive. Get out there, go around looking at other churches and see who's about.
Well, I know someone, a friend of mine, who thinks that he's single, and he
Right.
thinks that God's going to just bring a girlfriend to his door. Well, go figure. It doesn't always happen like that.
No, it
But,
doesn't.
there's one little phrase that I remember thinking about. Paul said, Apostle Paul said, being in the way, the Lord led me.
Yeah.
And my advice is do what you're doing to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
Go be part of a church, be part of a community, be part of people, and God He will bring the right partner to you, but be involved. Don't just stay at home. But the trouble is, you're in COVID and you're in lockdown, so it's difficult times.
Yeah, makes it more difficult. Yeah,
It does.
it
It does.
does.
But hopefully soon that will be over.
Yeah. And I mean, there are people out there who want to be single or they feel called to be single, and there's nothing wrong with that, as we have
Absolutely not.
said. No.
Yes, absolutely not. In fact, Paul, the Apostle Paul,
Yeah.
actually said, look, to be single, you've got greater opportunities for the Lord's service than even if you're married.
Yeah.
Because if you're married, you've got to think about your husband and your wife, and then consequently your children and everything like that. So he said, if God's call is on you to be single, I mean, I went to a church where my pastor, Pastor Lance Lambert,
Yeah.
remained single all of his life. And he was totally free to world travel and be, conference meetings, and, he had no confines of a family life.
Right.
And that was something that he felt called to.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
And that's fine.
yeah, absolutely. But
Yeah.
probably most of us have a desire for, to be married. But neither one is wrong or right. It's just who you are and who God provides for you,
Yeah.
But I would say, as a caution, don't just get married through FOMO. And FOMO, F-O-M-O, as some of you will know, or well, most of you will know, it is fear of missing out. And I've also met people who have got married, in my opinion, for the fear of missing out. Or maybe I won't meet anyone else, maybe I won't meet someone better. And they've got married because they thought, oh, well, this is the only one that's come along, maybe this is the one for me, God's, and they've got married, and some have worked out, some haven't. So I would say it's better not to be married. It's better to be single than marry the wrong person. I've also known one of my friends to go down the aisle knowing that this was a mistake.
Yeah.
And it was a mistake.
That doesn't make a happy marriage, does it? For a happy marriage.
Well, they divorced. A few years later, they divorced. Now she's happily married. So I would say just, really pray, seek the Lord. Len and I both asked the Lord individually before we ever met each other, Lord, will you choose our inheritance for us? Meaning, our inheritance being our partners. Lord, we could marry this one, that one, please will you choose our inheritance for us?
Yeah.
And I believe the Lord did.
Yes,
but it
of
meant
course.
waiting for the Lord's time. I mean, Len was 30 before he got married. He waited.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So Heather, what secrets do you feel in the Word of God can help us then have a successful relationship? In other words, Heather, what tools are in the kit for building relationships?
Well, I think building is a perfect word. In the Bible, it talks about a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish one tears it down. So even the Bible uses that word building. I think, number one, it's really important to have a good foundation. I remember my mom saying to me, Heather, have a foundation yourself in the Lord before you get married. Have a good foundation. And then when you're choosing for someone to get married, check whether they have a good foundation. Well, of course, when I met Len, he was just wonderful, the way he shared the word of God and his singing. And, I was a fan. I think I shared this before I ever married Len. So, for me, it was a dream come true. It doesn't mean to say that 44 years has all been, singing and preaching and, it's been building a lasting relationship. And building, as you know, and for the builders out there that are listening to this, it's hard work. Building, it's a physically tiring job, and you need to carry along your kit. If your kit's empty, well, you're not going to build anything, are you? So you need screws, a Phillips screwdriver, all different kinds of screwdrivers. You need a pack of nails. You need a glue gun. You need hammers, saws, all kinds of things in your toolkit before you're ever going to build anything. And I think that a wise man or woman will look to have certain tools in the kit of their relationships. And one of the ones, I think we've talked about this, about forgiveness.
Yeah.
I would say forgiveness is the number one tool. Because if you don't have forgiveness, our emotional part of our makeup is like a living. It's living. It's like a living plant. If you don't nurture that plant, it's just going to go limp, and it's just going to die.
Of course.
Forgiveness is just one of those things that is like fertilizer to the soul. It stops us becoming hardened. It stops us becoming calcified. It stops us becoming bitter and acrid. And I think, if you want a happy marriage, once again, are you the type of person that you would want to be married to? The person that I love being married to is someone who doesn't keep a record of my faults.
Right.
Men could. There's plenty to think of. I'm not perfect, and he's not perfect. I mean, I know a lot of people think he's perfect, but none of us in marriage are perfect.
We're not.
And none of us in relationships, whether it be in church, whether it be as best friends, we're all going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And God is perfect.
I think as well, don't go to sleep on an argument, and you do need that forgiveness. Otherwise, I think if you don't, you can become bitter, would you say?
I would say do everything you can to. I mean, my dad used to say to me, Heather, keep short accounts, which means if someone's hurt you or if you're feeling upset, try and sort it out as quick as possible. Now, I think there are some people that find that easier than others.
Of course.
There are some personalities that are so easygoing, nothing matters. I love those personalities, you can kind of open up, you can be yourself without fear of someone jumping on you and judging you and criticizing you. I mean, criticism is if you're being criticized, you won't want to open up your heart.
No.
Because you'll feel fearful and you'll shut down like a little limpet on a rock. And there is a phrase that says, faults are thick when love is thin.
Yes.
Isn't it amazing? When our love is drying up a little bit, or we're getting a bit tetchy and we start finding fault, you have to say, oh, Lord, come back to the Lord and ask Him to fill your heart again with His love. Because our own natural love, because we're so full of ourselves, our own love can be selfish. We need God's love to take away that selfishness and to have a giving heart and a flowing heart to the other person. And one thing I would say, and I'm sure we'd all agree, is don't get married for thinking that person can necessarily fill all your needs. I can't fill all Len's needs.
No.
He can't fill mine because he's a human being. We're both human beings, and we've got that spiritual aspect in our lives. We need the Lord. It's God that fills us with His love, and then we're able to give of that love to one another. So it's not 50-50, it's 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to look at marriage. How can I be the best wife for Len? Now, getting to know him and getting to know the things that he loves and appreciates. What's his love language?
And it's nice, isn't it, to do nice things together as well, like have a meal together and things like that.
Absolutely. And in the early part of our marriage, we had a beautiful couple who were very dear friends to us, and I'm sure some of your listeners will know Pastor Lyndon Bowring and Celia Bowring. They used to be at Kensington Temple, and we were really good friends with them, and Lyndon and Celia were the best mentors to us as a young couple. And I remember he just wanted to shower Celia with love. So I remember he told us one time, Celia went to hairdressers and she was having her hair done, as we can't in COVID, as he was saying, back in the day. She went to the hairdresser and he knew which hairdresser she was going to, and he knew what time she was going. But he didn't say anything to her. So she went along, she said, see you later to Linda. And then she'd been there for half an hour, and then unbeknownst to her, he had gone out and bought the most wonderfully huge bunch of flowers. And in he walks through the door and says, "Oh, Celia Barry? And they said, yes, sir, over here. And he comes to her with this massive bunch of flowers and gives her the huge kiss on the cheek.
Lovely.
Oh, darling, I love you so much. Have the best haircut, and gives her a big hug, gives her the flowers and walks out. And everyone else is going, oh, wish I had a husband like that. You know, what a lovely thing to do.
Very, very lovely thing to do.
Yeah. And I just think, you know, those little touches, you know, you don't have to do that.
No.
No one says in the rule book you have to do that.
No. But I think it's nice. I think it's quite important, even if it's just a bar of chocolate. You know, if your partner likes chocolate, it's just nice to do something. Those, like you say, those little touches, Heather. I've got a friend in Cornwall, and they used to once a month have a date night at home. They would turn the television off. She'd cook her husband a beautiful meal, and they would just spend quality time together where they just used to chat and just enjoy each other's company. And I think that's a lovely thing to do.
I mean, look, I couldn't agree with you more. And all of us are really, really busy.
Yes.
Or, you know, during the day. Perhaps not quite as much during COVID. But, you know, normally, you know, you're out at work, you're with the kids. Through all different stages of our lives, we're busy, on the go. But to give our husbands quality time where they feel valued. Important. I think to put value on a relationship is so precious.
Yes.
Because it's so easy, and I think especially when you've been married a long time, it's so easy to take one another for granted. You know?
Yeah.
It is. It's easy to take one another for granted. And so to put that value on your husband or your wife or your best friend or people in your church, place value on people, I think is just so precious. And people feel that. They feel that.
They do,
and they
don't
respond
they?
Accordingly.
Yeah. I think kindness goes a long way, would you say, in a marriage?
Absolutely. Oh, and you know,
that rings a bell. we won't worry about the phone.
We won't. Oh, but yes, and there's a story that I have about that actually that is really precious to me, because about 20 years ago, this was it's about 20 years ago, Len had a really significant stroke, and I'm sure those of you who know Len will have heard about that and will know about that. But me as a wife, that was devastating. I mean, I went to the hospital. I was called up by the doctor and told that, get here quickly, he may not survive. And I was very young then. You know, I thought, oh my gosh, you know, nothing prepares you for a call like that. Anyway, did have a stroke, and he went through 2 years of rehabilitation, which was very, very hard. It was hard on him, and it was hard for us as a family, because he wasn't the man that he had been the previous couple. I mean, he was, as you know, those of you who know Len, large as life, funny as, just life and soul of the party, you know, huge shoes to fill. And then all of a sudden he goes into chemical depression because part of his brain has been affected through this stroke. Well, it was like it was like I was married to someone that I didn't know just for that time.
Yes.
Anyway, shortly after those 2 years, I mean, it was okay. The Lord was really helpful, but it wasn't easy. I won't say it was easy, but incredibly, the Lord's grace is there amply for all that we need. So that is wonderful, and I experienced that grace during that time. But I remember going to England, and we went actually to visit Pastor Lyndon and Celia, and I remember Celia taking me aside and said, "Heather, are you okay?" You know, a bit like that Meghan Markle interview that we all remember, when the journalist said, "Are you okay?"
Yes.
And she said, "Well, not actually, I'm not really." And I said to Celia, "Well, actually, no, I guess," and I think I may have started to cry. just with her alone and me. And I said, it's been really tough. And she said, tell me how, Heather. And I just shared, and she said, I just feel like the Lord is giving me a scripture for you. And in Proverbs 3, verse 3, it says, let loving kindness and faithfulness, don't let loving kindness and faithfulness, don't let them go. Bind them as a necklace around your neck and imprint them on the tables of your heart. And I thought, oh my gosh, it came as a lightning bolt to me about, you were saying, loving kindness. And I underlined that word kindness because I was beginning to get a little bit frustrated, a little bit struggling,
Of course.
And oh, Heather, and I went back to the Lord and I said, yes, faithfulness, of course, is a key in marriage. That trust is built. So that's a key. That is a key. Those trust fibers in your emotions and in your spirit are so important to develop and not to have them broken. Which, of course, is what happens where there's infidelity and all of that, which is so sad. Those trust fibers are broken, and it takes a lot of time to heal back again. So loyalty is so important. Bind that around your neck like a necklace. But the other thing is loving kindness. Wear it as a sparkling necklace. But then it also says, but write it on the table of your heart. And I thought about that. It's daytime, your time, it's nighttime, my time. And as I was preparing, I thought, a necklace is something you wear externally to adorn your dress or whatever. It's right. Costume jewelry, which is great. But when you write something on the table of your heart, it's internal. And that day when Celia spoke to me, it became internal in my heart. I thought, kindness, oh Lord, will you help me to cultivate kindness as I do? Like, I love the garden. I just love being in the garden. But you know what? Any gardener will know, weeds grow dime a dozen. But in Australia, actually you find it easy to grow roses and beautiful flowers than we do in Australia because of the heat. Our flowers just wilt with the heat. I think it's through lack of interest because they just go, it's too hot to bloom in here in Australia. Whereas in the cold, it's easier.
Yes.
And I just think, cultivate kindness as you would an orchid flower or a really precious bloom that you have in a pot or something that you value. Water it, fertilize it, care for it. Relationships are worth caring for because if you don't, they're going to wither and die. And then it's sad.
Yes. I think understanding is also a good thing in marriage because you can't just think about yourself. You have to think about the other person as well. You have to see things from their perspective as well as your own. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Oh, in Proverbs it says, whatever you do in life, whatever you do, doesn't matter what job you do, doesn't matter what you go through, get wisdom and understanding. And the two go hand in hand together.
They do.
Get understanding whatever you do. Because if you don't, and look, this is not something that we're born with. Again, this is something that I think we need to cultivate, don't you?
I do. We do have to cultivate. It doesn't happen overnight, does it?
No. So we're not born with we're not born with kindness and understanding and wisdom. We come out screaming and yelling, me. So that needs to be cultivated and understanding. I mean, for Len and I, and I can only just share personally through our relationship, Len comes from a very, very different background that I came from. He came from a life of being abused and rejected and beaten and just used for slave labor when his mother, bless her, gave him away at the age of 6, and he was sent to an institution where he lived for the next 10, 11, 12 years. I, on the other hand, came from a family that was loved and nurtured. We had loving parents, my sisters. We grew up in a Christian environment. Len didn't. So of course when we fell in love, which we did, and then we were living together, oh my gosh. So when Len didn't react maybe like my father did, I remember Len saying to me, darling, I am not your father.
Yeah.
I had to think, well, that's right. He's not my father. He's his own self. And I fell in love with him. And I had to learn and understand that his way of looking at life was very, very different to the way I saw life, because I'd been so protected and he'd come from a completely different scenario. So yes, life in those early years was fast track understanding, fast track learning where he came from. And on the other hand, he had to fast track learning what it meant to be married to someone coming from a loving family, because he'd never had that, never. But it's been great, because generally you fall in love with, don't you, someone who's opposite to you. And Len has brought such richness to my life in understanding the world.
Wonderful.
And hopefully I was able to bring to the table something about family life and that kind of thing. And so together we've grown over the years and become more understanding, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So is there any other tools you want to tell us about?
Well, yes. So we've said forgiveness. We've said understanding. I would say laughter is a real treasure in a relationship. Like sometimes Len and I have to say, and life gets really very serious.
Yes.
In the ministry, you're dealing with a lot of very sad things. And even during COVID, you're dealing with a lot of really sad things that families have had to go through. The loss of dear loved ones. I mean, there's nothing, like we say, nothing can prepare you for that.
No.
We go through difficult times, but sometimes Len and I have had to say to ourselves, sweetheart, I think we're taking each other a little bit too seriously at the moment. We become you can come a little bit stressed, a little bit, oh, everything's so important. Well, do you know what? Life is going to carry on. Life is going to continue, whether you're stressed or not. So make it easy on your partner,
Yeah.
on your husband or your wife, and try and lighten things up with just being happy.
Yeah. Well, the Bible says laughter is like good medicine. And it is.
It is. And you know what? It's so easy to complain. And I remember Len telling an illustration, just recently actually. He talked about, when you go overseas, not that we're going overseas now, but when we used to go overseas in a plane, one of my fears was that we would be put in a seat with 2 screeching kids behind, and you think, oh, I've got to travel 14 hours with, kids banging their feet in the back of your seat and they're screaming and oh gosh, or there's little kids down the back and you're trying to sleep and oh. Anyway, he told the story of 2 children on the aircraft, and they were screeching away and they were carrying on, and everyone was looking around at them and going, oh my gosh, and then an air hostess came along and said to the kids, now kids, this is a squawk free environment where you're sitting, exactly where you're sitting, no squawking, no screeching, it's a squawk free environment. And so Len said, you know what? Let's make where we're living a squawk-free environment. So as soon as one of us starts to whinge or complain or we say to each other, excuse me, we are living in a squawk-free environment. Oh yes, of course. And then, it just lightens things up. So our house now is a squawk-free environment. We'll see how long that lasts.
Lovely. So, Heather, in closing, I mean, there are widows, and there's single people, and there's lonely people out there. What would you say to those people today?
I think loneliness is one of the hardest sorrows you have to bear.
I mean, some people feel lonely in a marriage, and they say some people feel lonely in a crowd.
Yeah. And I have friends who feel that way as well. I have Christian friends married to non-Christian husbands, and they feel lonely in the fact that they can't share their faith.
Yes.
With the other, or they won't come to church with them, or they feel lonely. You know, I think when you're single and you want to be married, you feel that loneliness very, very keenly. I think sometimes in a marriage you can feel lonely, like we just said. Then, of course, there are times where your partner or your husband or wife passes away, the Lord takes them, and then you're left having had a marriage for all those years. Just got to look at the Queen, and it was just so sad to see her there, just completely alone after 73 years. But it's going to happen to one of us. In a marriage, one will go before the other. And then, of course, there's, the widows, the widower. And then there's also the divorced person who's got to suffer the agony of that rejection.
Yes.
I think loneliness is one of the heaviest sorrows. And I think in the context of marriage, the Lord said, didn't he, in Genesis, it's not good for man to be alone. Now, understandably, that was in the context of him forming Eve and presenting Adam with a wife. But I think the concept of aloneness is, if you are alone, seek friendship. Seek good friends.
I would
seek
agree.
If you're Christian, seek Christian friends.
It's good to have friends.
It is. And in lockdown, like even we're doing, and what you and Paul are doing on the church on the internet and Living Stones, it's connecting, even though we can't go out, or that, social distancing. And even in our church, we are having church, but we have to social distance and we can't hug, and, it's strange. These are strange times. So I think, Zooming is good. Texting, calling each other on the phone. We're able to have coffees with friends now, and we can go for meals. And I just think that's really precious. So any form of connection that you can have emotionally is healthy in this, if it's a healthy relationship, I should say, but it is worth pursuing. So in a community, if you love to walk, if you love to play sport, if you love to exercise, find a walking group, that kind of thing. Or, in church life, fellowship is such a blessing, to come together and to sing and to worship.
It is.
Those are things that I think are really important to seek out. But the only trouble is that I think when you get used to being on your alone, you can turn to other things, and you can become a little bit introvert.
Right.
And you just sort of settle inside the walls of your home and don't seek out friendships. And then you can get used to loneliness. And I think I would encourage you, if you're listening and you're hearing this, if that's become you, to ask the Lord to give you good friends and connections that will encourage you. Because encouragement, affirmation, is another tool in the kit. When you can affirm one another that they are precious, that they're beautiful, that you appreciate them, that you, and that's like feeding a plant as well. Affirmation, encouragement, value, forgiveness, laughter, joy. Joy is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. Lord, please help me. Fill me with joy today. Another thing, in closing, I could go on forever, but another thing I would just say is have a servant heart.
Yes.
How can I serve? So it's not all about me. We live in an age of entitlement.
Mm.
We feel so entitled. No. How can I serve the community? How can I serve my church? Do I go and think everyone's there for me? You know? Or do I go with a servant heart? In a marriage, do I think, why isn't he doing this? Or why isn't she doing this? No. How can I be a blessing? How can I serve? Have a giving heart, have an overflowing heart. And that comes back to your relationship with the Lord.
It does, it really does. Heather, can I say thank you? I've really enjoyed our conversations over the past 3 weeks. It's been really great, and this will help many people today. And so thank you so much. It's been great, and I just pray that the Lord will continue to bless you and Len in your ministry out in Australia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeannie. God bless you. And I just want to say to all of you who are listening, thank you for having me in your home. Thank you for listening. And I just pray that the Lord will richly bless you all in all of your relationships. May you blossom and may you be a sweet fragrance in your lives wherever God has planted you.
Thank
God
you.
bless.
And thank you for being a blessing to Living Stones Church on the internet today. Good day to you, Heather.
Oh, very good, Jeannie. You're practicing well. G'day.
I'm doing okay. God bless. Thank you, Heather.